Alicia, I'm not going to do it right. Szezendor? All right. Welcome. I'm not going to do it again. I did it once, but she's going to introduce herself. I bet she can. When it's red, it's live.
Hello? Yeah?
You're there.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. My name is Alicia Szezendor. I'm a resident of New Brunswick. I live in St. John. I am not a doctor or a nurse. I'm not a politician or a scientist, but I'm a mother, and I owe it to my daughter to be here today. So, I would also like to clarify, Mr. Carty made a comment about people who don't vaccinate are part of some sort of conspiracy group. What happened to my daughter is not a conspiracy. It was very real. So that being said, I wrote a big presentation that I wanted to give to you guys today. But all the presenters before me, I feel touched on a lot of things that I want to say, and I feel they did a great job with that, and I'm not going to repeat that. So what's left for me is my story, my daughter's story, and how Bill 39 will directly affect me and my family. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, well that took the first page. So my daughter was born October 11, 2016, perfectly healthy, beautiful. Immediately she was given the vitamin K shot and the hepatitis B shot. She immediately reacted to those. She became jaundice. They told me that was normal, she would be fine. That was basically true. So next came her 2-month vaccinations. I took her to our family doctor. According to the recommended schedule, that day she would receive the hepatitis B along with 2 other shots, but those 2 shots actually contain 6 vaccines, right? So when we're talking about shots, it's not just a single shot for a single vaccine. There's many vaccines in a shot. My doctor told me that unless my 2-month-old baby was going to participate in intravenous drug use or unprotected sex or share a razor with somebody who was infected with hepatitis, she didn't really need it. He then told me that it was not necessary, but if I planned to send her to public school, she needed that vaccine. That was a lie. That's not true. It wasn't true at the time. It may be true in the future. It wasn't true. So when he told me that, I thought he was a quack. And I thought, how could this be recommended for a baby when it's not necessary? And I told him that I wanted her to have that shot. I didn't know at the time that he neglected to give her that shot, even though it was recommended. He's a physician. I'm a parent. I wanted her to have that. And he decided that she didn't need it, and he didn't give it to her. I'm thankful now for that, but at the time, I wanted her to have that shot. He also neglected to give her another vaccine, but he did give her the DTP. So immediately following that vaccine, once we got home, she started a loud, intense crying, which was not like a normal 2-month-old hungry cry. I mean, it was a cry that was ear-piercing. It was shattering to a mother, and I had no idea what was going on. She had a raised injection site, which they'll tell you is typical and normal. It was hard, and it lasted 6 days on her leg. After her vaccine, she got a large, dark vein in the center of her forehead, which popped out when she was crying. And she developed a small patch of eczema on her back in between her shoulders. She stopped nursing completely. She would not take my breast, which was extremely devastating to me because I knew that was the best thing I could do for my daughter. I continuously pumped so that I could still provide her with that milk. She wouldn't allow anybody. She was just a small baby, but as soon as anybody would touch her, she would clamp right up. Her whole body would go stiff, and you could not console my daughter. So the next came her 4-month vaccines. Again, she was not given all of her recommended vaccines as per my doctor. Even though I wanted her vaccinated, he did not give her all of her vaccines. So after he did give her the vaccines that he thought were acceptable, she again started to cry. This time it lasted a lot longer. It lasted for days. She also got the swelled up injection site, which was bigger. This time, the first time it lasted, 6 days. This time it lasted 11. The dark vein, the protruding vein on her forehead came back. Her eczema grew significantly. Of course, she had trouble nursing again after that. Her entire body went purple with red blotches within 48 hours of that vaccine. Now, this one was really, it's funny because looking back on it now, I laughed and I called it cute. I compared her to a frog. She started this tongue protruding thing that I thought I was a first-time mother. I didn't know. I actually laughed at it. I called it cute. I showed people how my daughter did this. I didn't know. I didn't know what that was at the time. She started a head twitch. Kind of went like this. She was just a small baby, so it wasn't like overly noticeable, but it was immediately following her vaccines. There's no mistake about it. It's not a coincidence. This immediately followed her vaccines. Now, it's going to sound crazy when I tell you that I took my daughter back for her next round of vaccines, right? After all these reactions, how could you? But because most people don't know how damaging vaccines are, and they don't make the connection, that's exactly why I brought my daughter back, because I wanted her to be fully vaccinated. I wanted her to be protected, and I wanted to be a good mother. So I didn't fully make the connection, and I brought her back for her 6-month vaccines. Things became much more clear. This was when she was supposed to have another round of the hepatitis B vaccine, which, remember, I told you my doctor didn't feel like she needed. So then again at these vaccines, he decided not to give her that vaccine. But like I said, I wanted her to be fully vaccinated. That should have been my choice, but he didn't want her to have it, and for whatever reason, he didn't give it to her. So this when things got very real. Things were much different this time. So a lot of the same reactions, her loud, intense crying that lasted days. The red heart injection site became purple, and this time it lasted 29 days, a full month. Her leg was swelled up. It was huge. Her eczema spread throughout her entire body. Her nursing trouble insisted. Her whole body became purple with red blotches, and when you touched her, it became white. She started, instead of the tongue protruding, she started licking her lips and sticking her tongue out and wagging it. Her head twitch now became a full-on head collapse. Like it wasn't just a small twitch, it was her whole neck collapsing. She started ticking and twitching. And she developed a blank stare. She lost all eye contact. She lost focus. She had a spaced out look. I thought she had trouble with her hearing because she stopped looking at me. She stopped responding to her name. And this was no coincidence. This was immediately following these vaccines. So sometimes she would just stare there, and she would stare, and she would hit her head. She would bite her hands, and she would hit her head and hit her head off anything she could. And I didn't know what was going on. Now that I know better, I know exactly what was going on. It was aggressive and repeatedly hitting her head. Sorry, I'm losing my space, and don't mind me if I choke over my words or I talk fast or I choke. I'm not used to this type of setting. I'm not used to speaking in front of people like this, but I owe it to my daughter to be here, so I'm doing the best that I can. After these, this is when I really started to, okay, something's going on here. I was calling the doctor. I was asking all my family members and friends, like, have you ever experienced anything like this? What is going on? Nobody had any answers at all, of course, right? Next, while waiting to get into her doctor, I went to a local mom support group in St. John. My questions were immediately shut down, and I was told we do not talk about vaccines in here. So this was the very first time that I had ever heard any sort of taboo related to vaccines. I didn't even know that, you know, there was one side or the other or anything like that. I had no idea. So my first step was to look at which vaccines she had had and to learn what I could about those vaccines. And that was the very first time that I noticed, because what I'm trying to explain here, sorry, I'm sort of backtracking, but I wanted to explain why Bill 39 cannot pass, because the recommended schedule that we have right now is already so flawed and there's so much wrong with it that to mandate this is just, it just cannot. So I started to look at her vaccines to learn what I could. So then I noticed that my daughter was provided with extra vaccines that were not recommended for her age, and they are not on the recommended schedule. My daughter was given extra doses that she did not need, and my doctor also failed to give her vaccines that were recommended that I was approving. So we cannot mandate that because it's not even right in the way that it is, right? I was scared, I was angry, and I was confused. Like, how could this happen? And why is it happening to my daughter, right? What can I do? Nobody has any answers. We finally get into my family doctor. I brought her vaccine records to show him exactly what he had done to my daughter. He told me in all of his years of practicing, he had never heard of such reactions, even though every one of her reactions are listed on vaccine inserts. So it's not like they're not known. It's not like they're rare. They're known, and they're very specific, and they happen all the time. So what's going on here? Like, that's what I'm thinking. What is going on? The same doctor who talked me out of getting the flu shot and who neglected to give my daughter the hepatitis B vaccine because he didn't feel it was necessary was now telling me that he was unaware of the dangers of vaccines and the reactions that come with them. Okay, so now he referred us to a pediatrician. There was nothing more he could do for my daughter, right? So the wait to get into the specialist was a long time. While we waited, we learned, we researched, and we were appalled by what we learned. I mean, it was devastating. During that time, we started treating my daughter at home using resources and methods that were shared with us by families who we connected with by sharing our own story. And when I say families that we connected with, I mean hundreds of families. I have personally spoken and connected with hundreds of families here in Canada that have either had their child vaccine injured, death from vaccine, or have had injuries themselves. So it's not rare. It's not rare at all. Finally, we get into the specialist. I tell him everything that had happened with my daughter. His initial response was she was probably vaccinated properly. It was probably just incorrect, he probably ticked off the wrong things. She was probably vaccinated correct. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. All we can go by is the records, and the records clearly state that she was given extra vaccines and was refused vaccines that I wanted her to have. So he then followed that with telling me that she probably reacted to the P part of the DTP. He said this was the most common for reactions. I wish now that I had asked him how he would know that, but instead I accepted his answer. And he then handed me this paper, which cites American websites and a link for patient education conversations, which provide him with using clear language that will avoid academic pitfall, is what this says. So it has a couple links for an American website and also for Canadian Pediatric Society. 2 links, 3 links, with basically what it says is how he should talk to me when I'm hesitant. He then concluded our appointment, suggesting that with his best advice, it would be in our best interest to continue on with the vaccine schedule and keep going with my daughter. There was nothing else he could do for us. So next, we switched family doctors. I brought her to the new doctor, who then told me that when she contacted our previous family doctor, there were absolutely no medical records for my daughter. No medical records, including vaccine records or any records at all. Nobody. So according to the doctors, this never happened, and none of this took place. There is no records except for the records that I have. So she said that she was next going to contact the pediatrician that we were referred to and see what his conclusion was and get a letter from him. That was a little over a year ago, and I've never heard back from her. We've never gone back, and that's where it stands. Nobody has any record of what was done to my daughter except for me, and nobody cares about what was done to my daughter except for me. So Next up, I've been hearing a lot about herd immunity these last couple days and how important it is. But we all know from the statistics that the Government of Canada puts out, they're saying 80% of adults aren't up to date on their vaccines. That's actually 94%. That comes from the government. They sent that letter to my house. So 94% of adult Canadians are not up to date. So I'm expected to continue vaccinating my daughter for the greater good of the herd when I've already sacrificed her optimal health for the greater good of the herd, the same herd who is going to exclude my daughter from an education, and the same herd who now wants nothing to do with my daughter because she will not sacrifice any more of her health for the greater good. So, if Bill 39 did somehow pass, who would qualify for a medical exemption? Does it come before the devastating reactions of a vaccine? Or are we able to get that medical exemption before our children are harmed? Right? How hard will it be to get an exemption? And which doctor exactly is going to be willing to put their signature on a medical exemption with all the taboo around vaccines? Oh my goodness, I had things written and I'm not even reading them. I'm actually pretty proud of how I'm just kind of doing this. Anyway, my other question, because I've heard this in other spots, is will there be a limit of exemptions that each doctor can write? Because that's a thing in other places, right? And what happens when they reach that limit? It just doesn't matter for the rest of us because they've reached that limit, or will there be a limit? And like I said, who qualifies for that? So, I've also been asked by a friend who couldn't be here today. This doesn't pertain exactly to me, but it does to her and her family. They are a vegan family. They do not vaccinate because of the use of animal cells in the making of vaccines. I don't know if you guys are aware, but when they're manufacturing vaccines, they use bird, pig, cow, dog, monkey, mouse, worm. Of course, there's eggs in there, chicken cells, all kinds of animals. So, I mean, once you take away non-medical exemptions, you're also, there's the vegan community that will be affected with that. Another concern if Bill 39 passes is there's no injury compensation available. Now, for me, at the same time, that worries me that I've been hearing a lot about compensation being put in place, because I'm just wondering, like, who's going to decide the number value on our children's life or our children's health? Who's going to decide what our children are worth, whether they're alive and damaged or dead and in the ground, right? Who's going to make that decision? That really concerns me, especially where it's a stranger that's going to put a price tag on my daughter. The final issue that I have with Bill 39, the removal of non-medical vaccination exemptions, is the aborted fetal cells used in vaccines. I'm a Christian, so I'm pro-life. I'm definitely against abortion, and you know, it's one side or the other. It's neither here nor there. I'm a Christian. I'm pro-life, and the use of aborted fetal cells goes directly against my religious beliefs, and it goes directly against my personal beliefs. And may God have mercy on every single person that knowingly injects aborted fetal cells. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We still have time for questions.
Oh no.
Are you willing to take questions?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you talk fast.
Go easy on me. I'm just the mom.
You're not just the mom.
Every time someone ever says, I'm just a mom, I always have to correct them. There's no such thing as just. Thank you, like we've said to others, for sharing your story and for the courage to come here. And experiences and values like yours are important to be heard, and we value them being put in the record here, right. So just so you know. I did have a question about a couple of statements that you made in your story, and I think at least 2, maybe 3 times you had said the reactions that you identified that happened with your daughter, quote, immediately after the vaccine. Can I just get you to flesh out what immediately means? Like, was it the next day, or was it like an hour later? Or?
I kept really good records, so I can tell you exactly when each reaction happened after. I mean, I literally have it immediate, 1 week, immediate. So
okay, but
if there's certain reactions.
It's just the immediate one that I'm
The
wondering.
immediate would have been the crying, the injection site that was raised, the dark vein in her head. It took a few weeks for the eczema to break out, but eczema is a known, and that's another thing I should have mentioned. Eczema is a known reaction, but it's also a cause for not getting, pretty much every vaccine insert that I've ever read says if the patient has eczema, they should not receive the vaccine. So my doctor should have taken that into consideration, but I mean, there's a lot he didn't take into consideration. So.
Okay. No, I was just curious how we interpret immediate could be a variety of ways.
Basically, immediate. When I was doing this out, immediate would have been, I would say, less than 12 hours, but a lot of them took up to, a lot of different reactions took up to 48 hours.
Yeah. So one other thing I would ask, I highly value solid research, and it seems that a lot of the research that informs this practice comes from reports that are made after the fact. So do you feel, like in true conscience, do you feel that the reports that you gave are not carried forward to inform the research?
Well, I mean, you mean the reports of what happened to my daughter? Nothing was, like I said, there is
They couldn't find her file.
Right, there's absolutely no medical records for my doctor. Nobody has a record at all except for me. There's no record. And I don't know, I mean, I don't want to fall into Mr. Carty's conspiracy theory, so I don't know if these records disappeared on their own or if there was just never a record. I have no idea why there's no record, but nobody has any record, I mean, at all of my daughter.
Well, again, I thank you very much, and I'll allow my colleagues to have some time.
Go ahead, Mr. Fitch.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being here and making the presentation. We've had a lot of good personal testimonies today, and you're certainly adding that to the list. Maybe I just missed, how's your daughter's health now, presently?
There's things, like, my daughter's recovered somewhat. We've gone through very extensive detoxification and healing her gut and her brain. My daughter has made significant progress, and I'm thankful for that, because a lot of other families that I talk to and that I'm friends with and that I've built a relationship with aren't so lucky. My daughter still obsessively does certain things. She still has a lot of these traits, but a lot of them we were able to recover her from with no help from her doctor.
I see. You mentioned about the aborted fetus cells, and did you have a reference as to where you, because I know people were saying earlier today, the pharmaceutical folks, that they either didn't know or did they say they weren't aware? And I was just trying to recall that. So did you have a source on?
I don't right this second, but I could get that for you. And it's accessible information on the internet. There's two sides to that. Like there's links and stuff that will say that there hasn't been aborted fetal cells used since the 60s. And there's suggestions that it's still used now under different names, but either way, whether it's from now or the 60s, whether it was originated from that or not, it still goes directly against my religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm. No, fair enough. That's all the questions I had, Chair, and once again, thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Ms. Minton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you whether you are aware if any of the doctors you saw reported any of the symptoms that you observed in your child. I'm not sure if they ever observed those symptoms or not. I'm not sure how many medical appointments you have, but if you could speak to that, please.
I would think not. I mean, for the simple reason that they don't even have records of seeing her. So I would think that they didn't report anything. And at the time, I didn't know how to do that myself, or if there was anything in place that I could do that. I didn't realize how far this was going to go, you know, when her reactions started and everything. So I would say no, it never got reported, as with many reactions, because most people don't know what to look for. I mean, like I said, when my daughter was sticking her tongue out and doing those things that are known adverse reactions, I literally was showing people how cute she was as a frog. You know what I mean? So the fact that that was actually a reaction, I think a lot of people go through that same thing and don't even know that they're going through it. So
okay,
it's definitely underreported.
Thank you. And I'm not sure whether, I think someone else said today that there's a 3-year reporting period. I don't know if that's true or not.
You know, we just kind of cut ties. When the doctor was supposed to get back to us with the conclusion from the pediatrician, from the specialist, like I said, it's been over a year and she's never gotten back to me, and I guess we kind of just left it where they left it. And we've seen progress with her, and we feel that her health has definitely gotten better since we've stopped bringing her to doctors and stopped vaccinating. So we're really not concerned that they haven't gotten back. But yeah, like I said, nobody cares. Nobody cares. There's nowhere to turn. And it's a sad thing because this could be your guys' grandchildren. This could be your guys' children. This could be your situation. Unfortunately, it was mine. But other people are going to find out for themselves when they go through the same thing. There is nowhere to turn. There is no answers. And nobody will even take you seriously. My doctor told me how dangerous it was to give her those vaccines. And when I went back to him and told him what had happened to her, he told me he'd never heard of that. The same doctor that told me how dangerous it was to give her those vaccines told me he never heard of those reactions. So there's nowhere to turn. There's nobody that'll listen, and people will get back to you and they'll get back to you, but they won't. And nobody cares about your children except for you. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify, because I'm slightly just confused by the information that you've provided. Sure. Do you know or do you not know if your daughter was vaccinated with DPT?
My daughter was vaccinated for DTP. Where did that go? Oh, sorry. My daughter was given the DTP 3 times, and like I said, the pediatrician, the specialist, said that she reacted to the P part of the DTP.
All right, and when we look at the product monograph, the symptoms that you have described that your child exhibited are the ones that are identified in the product monograph as being adverse reactions?
I'm sorry, were you asking me or telling me?
Are you aware of that?
I don't have the insert with me right now.
I'll read you some of them.
Sure.
Hypersensitivity, anaphylactic reaction, let me see, irritability, screaming. You're nodding your head. It won't pick up, so you have
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yep. Okay. Convulsions, prolonged or unusual high-pitched crying.
Yes.
Hypotonic, hyporesponsive episode.
Yes.
Unresponsive to parents.
Yes.
Eating less.
I mean, she was nursing at the time, and I had to pump full time because she would no longer come to my breast.
Okay, so those are all listed here in the product monograph as potential adverse reactions, but you were not informed of those?
I was not informed of that at all. The only thing that he told me was that she didn't need the hepatitis B, and he took it upon himself to not give her that, which, I mean, like I said, I'm thankful for that now, but, I mean, at the time, it wasn't his decision. I wanted her to have that. So, no, I was not given informed consent at all.
And in the warnings and precautions on the product monograph, it says, and I'm reading at page 8 of 42 from the documents provided by Ms. Urquhart, that careful consideration of potential benefits and possible risks should be weighed when, after a dosage, I'm summarizing here now, of this vaccine, there has been persistent crying lasting greater than 3 hours within 48 hours of administration.
Right, except hers lasted a lot longer than 3 hours.
But it did, I'm just naming off one
Yes.
of these. That was your
Yes.
situation. So when you went for your second dosage, were you informed, did you have that discussion with your doctor that that's what happened? And
No, because I didn't make the connection at that point. I would have never given her the second dose had I realized that what was happening to her was I didn't make that connection.
right, because you didn't know in the first place that that was a potential adverse
Correct.
reaction? Is that accurate?
That's very accurate, yes.
That's all the questions I have. Are there any other questions arising from my own questions? Yes, Ms. Minton.
What you were just
Yeah,
saying?
sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just to follow up on what Madam Chair was just saying, in the warnings and precautions for Pediasil, which I don't know if it was Pediasil
Yes,
or
it
not.
was Pediasil,
It
yeah.
was Pediasil, okay. It says that it's extremely important that the parent or guardian be questioned concerning any symptoms or signs of adverse reaction. So, yeah.
Yep.
So, but you weren't questioned about that.
I guess the main thing that I wanted to stress too with what happened with my daughter, I know this isn't everybody's case. I know probably the majority of children that get vaccinated probably get vaccinated properly. But this is how flawed the vaccine system is that we have in place now. So to mandate something like this, because according to my daughter actually had extra doses, but according to this, she's also missing some. So I would still have to give her doses that she was supposed to have that according to them, she did have, but they just didn't record it properly. But according to the records, she didn't have it, so she would have to have those again. So before we can mandate something like that, we first have to fix the problems that we have with vaccines, with this little piece of paper that tick, 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 check mark off, and here we are, right?
Are there any further questions? Thank you very much for attending, and I know that not everyone is here who has presented, but I know it's much appreciated by all members of the committees, the time that individuals have taken to be here to present, and I can assure each and every one of you that the information will be well reviewed and taken into consideration as we provide recommendations to the legislature on this bill. Thank you very much.